You can experiment on this.
Thank you.
We're already doing this.
Yeah. Well, I think in education you have to be bold, a bit brave, take some risks, experiment as much as you can.
Yeah.
Students will surprise you sometimes in terms of what they actually respond to. Anyway, today, giving and receiving feedback, that's our plan.
Yo-yo.
Which is, as you're probably very aware, a significant part of what we do as teachers. We're constantly giving feedback, even if we're not aware of it. We are, students are reading us all the time. I like this because it really is about having this mindset that it's a culture. You know, there's this culture that feedback is a gift. We fear it sometimes, and makes us anxious. And we sometimes feel less of a person because someone has said, you know, you could do this a little bit better. But if we can view it as actually a gift, the world changes for us personally. Very hard to do. And I think a lot of organisations now are actually doing a lot of research into how to inculcate this attitude about feedback, that it's not a negative, it's actually a necessity in the 21st century. Around the place in terms of feedback, you will see a lot of this on student work, and there are a lot of teachers who think that's actually quality feedback. And whilst that's very positive and supportive, it doesn't actually demonstrate to students why it's excellent. So there's this overall arching idea that, yeah, they've done well, but why have they done well? That may not necessarily transfer to another task because they don't know what was good and what was not so good, or if all of it was absolutely amazing, which parts, etc. So it's understanding the nuances of giving and receiving feedback as well. I found this, and I particularly like it because it captures that responsiveness that we were talking about last time we were together, where the teacher provides information, assesses student learning, and the student does it. The teacher looks at that and then adapts it. So there's this non-stop loop where teachers and students are dependent on each other to improve learning on both sides. I don't think a day went past when I was teaching, when I drove home, not thinking that I hadn't learnt from my students that day. I absolutely always did. And it's about this, learning to close the gap. If that is broken though, then if there's something not quite effective in our feedback loop, we may not necessarily be getting the best out of ourselves and out of each other, because each classroom develops a kind of a dynamic, and students desperately, despite the roll of the eyeball sometimes and the negative body language, they actually really do want to know how they can improve, most of them, even students with learned helplessness. But essentially the learning intentions for today are these: to understand how to apply Hattie and Templey's model of feedback to specific examples of student learning in the English classroom. So I've brought some student work in, some real student work. It's going to be very practical and very hands-on, and you'll have an opportunity to mark and tick, and it will give you a bit of an advantage. It will give you an informed position when you're asked to do that in school. And we're going to talk about giving and receiving oral and written feedback as well. I think part of giving and receiving feedback, which I've kind of alluded to, is understanding the self and the relationship we have with feedback, because it's really quite complex. There are a lot of emotions in play because we're talking about our self and our identity and how we see ourselves, and sometimes that's not stable. If you're not very confident or if you're insecure, then you're more fragile than someone who isn't. So it's just about being mindful, because some of the research says that we can respond in a variety of ways. I'm going to talk about the differences between a dispirited response to feedback, I'm useless, hopeless, versus a defensive, I know what I'm doing, or dismissive, whatever, don't really care anyway, I didn't want to know that, versus open, okay, tell me more, I really want to improve. So it's quite a complex interaction, internal dialogue that's happening. By the end of today's session, the successful criteria will be if you can actually apply Hattie and Templey's model of feedback to specific examples. You all will. hopefully this word here, confidence, you'll be feeling a little bit more confident about it because you'll know what to expect, and you'll feel more comfortable providing feedback to students on track than before walking in. And I think this is also important, as I keep mentioning, is these innate defaults for giving and receiving feedback. What are they? If we're aware of them, then we can modify according to the situation. Because again, that internal dialogue is constant, and we have moments of confidence and moments of despair and fear, essentially. So that's really where we're going in terms of success criteria. Now, Jill was talking about the 4 levels of feedback. And I'm just going to go over them, give you an example of what it looks like in the English classroom. So we've got task level, and that's how well tasks are understood and performed. And this is an example. So your analysis about Macbeth and his vaulting ambition is discerning, particularly about his steady deterioration. So this is very specific to that task. The student is getting feedback about how well they understand Macbeth, nothing else. So that's not necessarily transferable to any other task. And teachers are constantly complaining about how knowledge taught in one class doesn't appear in another class, or it doesn't even appear from year to year, even though English teachers are saying the same thing. So one might logically assume perhaps it's a way we're giving feedback that might be part of it. It's not, nothing is ever black and white and purely simple as this, but it's something that we can all work on and improve. That's not a bad thing. That's pretty clear and concise. There's a lot of information in just that one sentence, but whether students can then apply that to the next task is another thing. So then there's the process level, the main process needed to understand and perform tasks. So this is at the process level, and here are some examples. You have chosen quality quotes from the text, see that's the process, and use them in discerning ways, again that's the process. And here's another process to support your analysis. So you're saying to the student, you've done this, that can be transferred to another task. They know then that they know how to use quotes. That's basically what that's saying. Here's another process. Your essay is structured and sequenced. You have argued the thesis throughout and formed a coherent argument. So if the student gets that, they know that they can do that, and that's more likely to transfer to another task. Your grammar is accurate, not quite as articulate as that, but it is still saying that you understand how to write, which is a process. Self-regulation level is self-monitoring, directing and regulating of actions. So here are some examples. You have clearly worked hard at seeking feedback and actively applied it to improve your essays. There's an important bit of background here. The teacher knows the student. Clearly by that statement, the teacher is saying there is a difference in this assessment, this student response, than the last one. I can see that there's an improvement. Self-regulation has been in play. The student has done something different, has recognised a learning need and has gone about developing proficiency in that area. Particularly the use of topic sentences to create a cohesive, well-developed argument. So that's very precise. So again, this is all about what the student has done. They have exercised discipline and persistence and gone about learning in a particular way. This again, you have shown commitment to learning the formula of embedding quotes. You know you've taught that as a teacher. You've gone through the steps multiple times. You've workshopped paragraphs and so on. And you can see that the student has actually done it. This might be the first essay where that student has actively done it. So you want to recognise that they are regulating their behaviour in terms of their learning. You're also applying grammar rules learnt during the workshopping of our paragraphs. Great focus, and you can see a link here. So that's at that self-regulation level. The more self-regulated a student is, the more successful they're going to be. So for all those students who aren't here today, they might have an absolutely valid reason, but in terms of self-regulation, a lot of discipline is actually required because they've got goals and they've got purpose and they're doing what needs to be done to get to a particular level. Now, self-level is really interesting, and this is where a lot of us do tend to sit. Really arouses a lot of interesting conversations out there. And they can be quite flippant comments about people's performance levels. These are personal evaluations and they're about the learner. A lot of research says that when we focus on the learner, motivation goes down and performance goes down with it, because it's about the person instead of the product. And when it's about the person, it becomes sort of wrapped up in that identity and formation of self. And then fear comes along with that, because if the work isn't quite as good as the person thinks it is, then suddenly they are a hopeless, useless person. It's a really interesting bit of research. And these are examples. Good girl. So does that mean you're a bad girl if you don't happen to get a 7 or you don't get the A? Maybe you did the absolute best you could in that moment in time and that was a B. But maybe in a similar assessment 6 months ago you got a C. Well, going from C to a B is excellent. It's the correct trajectory. It means you are self-regulating and you're learning and you're applying new knowledge and new skills. So good girl doesn't really help much. You intelligent soul. There's always that innate negativity attached to it. Does that mean you're not intelligent if you happen to make a mistake and you don't master a particular assessment instrument, or maybe you're not as good at narrative writing as analytical writing? You can see how these naturally attach to the value of ourselves as individuals. Lovely work, great effort. Now, a lot of people will say that these are absolutely fine if you are linking them with this and linking them with that. And one could argue, okay, but there's a lot of research about that now. So I think there's a natural propensity to use these because we want people to feel good and we want to boost their self-esteem. But if we want to boost their learning and their ability to control their learning and the outcomes, then we need to give them the formulas, which is regulating their behaviour, knowing what has to be done and how to get there, giving them very clear and precise feedback on what they've done well, and to encourage them to keep doing it. This student knows that they know how to embed quality quotes in a quality way, so next time they're more likely to be able to do that as well. And I always do that with any task because it's nice to recognise that a student understands in depth. Oh, he's a really complex character. So maybe a combination. I'm going to try and steer away from that, or at the very least, focus predominantly here. So anyway, just food for thought. First thing you're going to do, that's my foot. I'm going to play this video, and what I'd like you to do is just write down the feedback you'll give this student. So rough notes. Do you need to see it again?
Yes, please.
Okay. Now think of these 4 levels. Task level, how well the task is understood and performed. I actually remember when I was young, it took me a while to learn how to tie my shoelaces. It did. process level, the main process needed to understand, the self-regulation level, and the self level. Just have a look, and there's no judgment here because we all have a natural default. Where does the majority of your feedback fall? Just take a couple of minutes to think about it. This is really just self-diagnostic. It's just looking at what your natural propensity is in terms of giving feedback. What were you actually focusing on?
Process for me.
Process. So you would say to the student,
You don't need to loop the laces twice at the beginning because it prevents you from getting the tight knot that's required, and therefore you can't get the 2 loops that you need to tie.
that would help. That would help the student next time. Very next time a student's going to try it, they're not going to do the 2.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a significant piece of feedback. Others?
I think I'd probably sit at self-regulation, like between task and I think self-regulation. So like I've got down here, it's clear there was foundational knowledge of the task, but it could have been better executed. Perhaps revisit your songs and then think each step through before you attempt the task next.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's helpful or as helpful as
Songs?
you know, I never did any of them, but there's the little songs where it's like, oh, the bunny goes around the tree and then through the forest.
Really?
Yeah.
I missed out on that.
I know.
I missed out on that one too.
Yeah.
I think it's from museum movies.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. I found it. I struggled to put down notes because I was like, I know they're doing it wrong,
Yes.
and I was really concerned about giving feedback that would bring them down. But also, I noticed that they were still attempting the whole time, and that was something that for me really stood out. Was that they were still attempting, they were still trying. So it wasn't like for me, and I couldn't distinguish like the task and the process is so entwined. It wasn't like I could really separate the 2 because the process was in the, you know what I mean, like tying laces.
So what's,
specifically.
and I would say you'll feel like that as a teacher so often. You'll be marking student work and you'll be going, they need help.
Yeah.
How am I going to help this student? How do I articulate?
Yeah, and that's
Steps.
one thing I noticed as well is like I wouldn't know how to, and then when you very literally said like when you gave feedback on how you would do it, in my mind I automatically thought the only way I thought I could help them is by showing them myself how I would do it and like modeling that, but I can't put that down in written feedback how I'd model that. So I don't know.
The agonies of it, right?
Oh.
Yes. So how do you put that in written form? Because sometimes that's the only opportunity you're going to have, and you'll be lucky sometimes if your students read that written feedback. Your comment about the self-regulation level and task is really interesting because I kept wanting to say, just keep trying harder, just keep working at it. Your feedback was really spot on, and so is yours. They're absolutely valid. Both sets of feedback are actually going to help that student.
Yeah.
And I suppose too, it's really important not to become too bogged down in exactly the right things to say and the wrong things to say. You just got to relax and be yourself too, because at the heart of you, if you have the well-being of that student in mind, that will come through. Students will read that, appreciate that, and respond accordingly. So we're going to make mistakes as teachers, we all do. So just relax a little bit and just when you can, because when you're marking student, when you've got a little bit more time, you're at home, you're sitting on the couch or whatever, just do a quick mind check. Just have you talked about the task? Have you talked about the process? You might decide in that particular instance that you don't want to spend too much time about the task because the process to you for some reason might be absolutely critical for that student. And in this case, this student needs a lot of help in terms of the process and task. Self-regulation, I think, is one of my default settings. That's something I really value, commitment and perseverance and tenacity. And so I want to scoop that child up, but you can't protect the child either. You've got to give them the precise advice. And there'll be some students who will give you essays that are similar to this example of tying shoes, and you won't know where to start. So you start at the very beginning. You probably give them some task level advice, give them process, give them some self-regulation, and sometimes you might just be wary of that. It's not necessarily wrong. Positive reinforcement is a very good thing.
In the self-regulation example you gave there, it said you've obviously worked hard. That also hits the self level to a certain degree because you've been told you worked hard and it's evident. Therefore, you're kind of killing two birds with the same stone there.
That's true. And really, when you think about it, they're interconnected, like you're saying. But if we're mindful of the differences, we can make sure we include multiple levels of feedback. Students will love you for it, seriously. If they get your feedback and they know what they're talking about. I mean, Michael last 2 weeks ago was saying, I don't know what I'm doing wrong. In fact, on Google Plus, there were so many university students saying, I don't understand what the feedback is that teachers are giving me. So how can you even improve in the first instance? So very clear and precise, not generalities like excellent work. Why is it excellent? What are the qualities that you want that student to take into the next task and the next task after that? So that was just an opportunity to think about how we come to the table, because we all do based on our past experiences as teachers and people, as you know, in every relationship. And it's a good idea to just keep that in mind as we move into receiving feedback. We're going to talk a little bit about that now. So we've given feedback, now we're going to receive it. So as I said earlier, really interesting relationship between openness to receiving feedback and our level of confidence about who we are and our efficacy. So you can see here that there's a relationship. If you have low confidence and you're closed to feedback, you're scared of it, you're anxious, then there's a good chance you'll be defensive. I know what I'm doing, I've done this before, you know, so on and so on. And we have all felt like that, I'm sure. And we operate on a continuum. This one here, low confidence and very open to feedback. Yeah, give me feedback, I want to improve, but there's so much lacking in confidence that it's, I can never do this, I'll never learn. We've all felt that, right? This is natural. And then here you've got confidence building along here, and you've got closed. What would they know? Again, it's this justification, isn't it? And then here, if you're open to yes, please, I want to learn. When your goal is learning rather than worrying about protecting your self-esteem, and you have some degree of confidence, then you're more likely to respond quite favourably to feedback. And we're going to have students in our group that are going to span all of these, and being able to manage that in a way, hopefully as time goes by, they will trust you and they'll start moving up into this area. But it is really quite complex. And of course, you're going to be getting a lot of feedback on prac. And I know that there are some teachers out there who don't like anyone in their classroom, any other adult. They feel very nervous and uptight and apprehensive because they feel like they're being watched. When that's not the spirit in which it's meant 99.9% of the time. So there's this fear, I suppose, underpinning it. I thought this might be a really good quick activity in terms of tips for receiving feedback. I'll let you read those, and when you're ready, if you can just write down a couple of appropriate phrases which I have, which are really handy to have up your sleeve that will just naturally pop out of your mouth when you're in situations where people give you feedback. It might be in an unexpected moment. It might be in an intense session with your supervising teacher. It's really good, even if you're feeling all this torment about what you're hearing. If you've just got these phrases that can encourage the dialogue to continue without perhaps revealing that too much, it can be really, really valuable. So a couple of minutes just to write down some phrases, and I'll get you to upload them to Edmodo, because that way we can have a list. I'm just having a good problem with Edmodo at the moment.
I know, but it's good to know which
Hadn't considered that before. Could you elaborate on that for me? People love to. They want to elaborate. Sometimes they don't want to give you constructive feedback either, and they feel bad. And saying that gives them license to be quite open with you, and you are the beneficiary of that. What are the steps I can take to improve this? That's the gift. That's developing that culture of recognising feedback as as a present. How would you approach this task? Lovely. Experienced teachers really like to share their knowledge and experience, because experience means a lot, and we learn a lot from experiences. And that's how we learn. We love storytelling. Humanity has since the beginning of time. Telling stories is invaluable. Thank you for pointing that out. I wasn't aware I did that. Really lovely, open and frank admissions that shows a strong willingness to engage. So I think some of those are really going to allow people to open up, and you'll get this really honest dialogue happening. So, and they were just, and you can see some similarities. So, in terms of giving feedback in the English classroom, let's think about what we're actually going to be spending our lives doing. We'll be giving feedback to students about genre. How well do they structure their response? If we've asked for an essay, have they given us an essay or a speech, or a narrative, or a monologue? Roles and relationships and register, so how well the student is connecting with the audience. So if you've asked a student to write an essay, it should be formal and distant. There should be an arm's length relationship between the student and the reader. They're setting themselves up as the expert, and their choice of vocabulary needs to reflect that. So their role and their relationship with the audience is distant. It's not intimate. In a narrative, it's intimate. You're welcoming them into your world. You'll be constantly helping students with written expression and the effectiveness of their communication, syntax, grammar, spelling and punctuation. And that's what a lot of those videos are of me workshopping paragraphs. I keep saying that is really powerful in terms of a strategy to help students understand language and action. That's the way to do it, because they can literally see the sentences changing shape and changing the impact on the audience. They can see the relationship between the audience changing according to whether you go formal or informal. You'll give a lot of feedback on spoken and signed expression, because students will be getting up and they'll be doing orals of some sort.
By sign, you literally mean sign language?
Yeah, signed.
Okay.
Yep, absolutely. That's an equity thing. Students have to be given the opportunity to demonstrate what they know and can do. And if they can't speak, then signing is absolutely valid. In fact, it's necessary. So that's equity. Do they use gestures for effect? Or are they really a distraction? Maybe they're doing a monologue about how heartbroken they are, and they just keep doing this the whole time because they have nervous habits. You'll be giving students feedback about that. Facial expressions. Are they doing a monologue and they're supposed to be distraught, but they're smiling or laughing? Pausing for effect and voice control. So these are the things that you'll be writing down in students' responses. You'll be making comment about their knowledge of the text and how effective their analysis is, or how effectively they've used quotes from the studied texts. And that links back to the example I showed you at the start. Audience positioning is linked in with roles and relationships. How do they position the audience? Do they position the audience to be empathetic for their main character and their narrative? Do they create rage and hatred for a particular character who is vile and wicked? Those sorts of things. How good are they at using language to manipulate the way the audience is feeling, thinking, and believing about a certain character or value? It takes some skill to do, but it is powerful. If we can encourage students to articulate in such a way that they can position their audience, might be their boss, might be their boyfriend, whatever it might be, they're going to have a much better chance of achieving their goal. And we're not talking about malice or being manipulative, we're talking about using language for effect, for power and impact. Do they actually convince the reader in their essay that their analysis of devices is so strong and so clear that the audience is convinced that their thesis is absolutely correct? Because that's part of it. They're using really good quotes and they're providing really good analysis. They're going to convince the reader that their thesis is right. And you're going to provide feedback on textual construction and deconstruction. So basically, what is that? That is how effective they analyse aesthetic features or how effectively they use aesthetic features. If they're writing a narrative, they're using aesthetic features. They're using imagery, metaphors, alliteration, all those poetic devices to make the reader feel something, to take the reader away from their world into their reality into the student's world. Or they're analysing aesthetic features. That metaphor makes the reader feel melancholy because it compares this to that. So these are all things you're going to be providing feedback to students about in the English classroom, and there are others. Now on Blackboard, I've focused on these 4 things. I've hammered them over and over and over again in those videos, because if you cover context, genre, audience and purpose, you are giving students the focus that they need to understand the situation in which they're using language and why they're using it in that particular way. So every single task you write for your students, and your HODs might say, can you please write this assessment task for this Year 8's assessment on, what's a Year 8 text? Odysseus. It's a bit beyond Year 8 text, but it's very popular. So that could very well happen. If you go over in your mind these 4 things, tick them off, then there's a chance that you're not missing anything that's important in English. So we have talked about these, and we've actually applied them and reflected about them. Now I guess we're thinking about these 3 questions. Where am I going, how am I going, and where to next? And based on everything we've done so far in this unit, this is what assessment is all about. It's about continuous improvement. So, I've highlighted